Everyone talks about Alexander conquering the world. Almost nobody mentions how he did it with forces that should have lost, 7,000 cavalry against tens of thousands, 40,000 infantry when the enemy fields double or triple that number. October 1st, 331 BC, near a village called Gaugamela in northern Iraq, the plain where one empire died and another was born. Flat ground, no trees, no rivers to hide behind. Just dust and heat, and a Persian army so massive that ancient writers claimed 1 million men stood in formation. Modern scholars say maybe 200,000, maybe less, but still enough to drown the Macedonians in bodies. Darius III, king of kings, ruler of the greatest empire on earth, chose this battlefield himself. He leveled the ground, cleared every rock, smoothed every hill. 200 scythed chariots with blades jutting from their wheels, ready to carve through infantry like wheat. 15 war elephants, cavalry from Bactria, Scythia, Armenia, Cappadocia, Media, every corner of his empire. Greek mercenaries who knew exactly how Macedonians fought. And in the center, surrounded by 10,000 immortals, Darius himself in his war chariot, wearing the diadem that meant he ruled from the Mediterranean to India. Alexander had 47,000 men. That is the number Arrian gives us, writing centuries later but using eyewitness accounts from Ptolemy, who stood on that field. 7,000 cavalry, 40,000 infantry. The Macedonians had crossed the Hellespont 3 years earlier with 35,000. Reinforcements came at Gordium in 333 BC, 200 cavalry, more infantry at other points. But they had been bleeding men in sieges and skirmishes. At Tyre alone, 7 months of fighting. At Gaza, another siege, disease, desertion, the long march through Syria and Mesopotamia. By the time they reached Gaugamela, they were undersupplied and exhausted. Darius knew it. That is why he chose to fight here instead of letting Alexander march to Babylon unopposed. That is why he assembled the largest army he could muster. This was the battle that would end it. Either Alexander would die on this plain, or the Persian Empire would. The moon represented Persia. The eclipse meant the eastern power would fall. Saturn was visible during the eclipse, 4 fingers from the moon according to Babylonian astronomical records. Saturn always meant bad luck for kings. A western wind blew during the totality, an eastern wind when the moon reappeared. The Magians, Persian priests, told Darius this was the worst sign possible, an eclipse in the 6th month, western wind. It meant invasion from the west would destroy the king. Alexander halted his army 4 days' march from Gaugamela and built a fortified camp. His men rested, ate, prepared. Parmenion, his second in command, 50 years old and a veteran of Philip's wars, came to Alexander's tent the night before battle. He suggested a night attack. The Persians would be unprepared. Confusion would favor the outnumbered Macedonians. Alexander refused. He said he would not steal victory like a thief. Alexander must defeat his enemies openly. This is what Arrian records. But there were practical reasons too. Night fighting was chaos. If the Macedonians lost in darkness, surrounded by enemies, there would be no escape. If they won, Darius could claim he was defeated unfairly. Alexander needed a victory so complete that no one could question it. His entire army remained in formation, thousands of men standing in the dark, waiting. The Macedonians slept. Alexander gave orders to feed the men well. Let them rest. He spent the night reviewing plans with his generals. At dawn on October 1st, 331 BC, some of those generals were surprised to find Alexander still asleep in his tent. They did not know he had been awake most of the night. If you value documented military history like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you are hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Arrian's Anabasis of Alexander, written in the 2nd century AD, but drawing directly from Ptolemy's first-hand account and from Aristobulus, both men who marched with Alexander. We also use the astronomical diary from Babylon, a cuneiform tablet now in the British Museum, written by priests of the Esagila temple. It is the only contemporary source describing Gaugamela, day-by-day observations of celestial events and political changes. Published analysis from classical scholar Peter Green, historian Jonah Lendering's work on the battle published at livius.org, and modern archaeological surveys by Sir Aurel Stein from 1938 that located the battlefield near modern Karamlesh in northern Iraq, east of Mosul. Now back to the information. Mardian archers, Red Sea contingents, Sidicinians. On the Persian left wing, facing Alexander's right, Bessus commanded. He had Bactrian cavalry, 1,000 of them according to Arrian. Scythian horsemen, Dahai cavalry, Arachosians, 100 scythed chariots in front. On the Persian right wing, Mazaeus commanded. Syrian cavalry, Median, Mesopotamian, Parthian, Armenian and Cappadocian cavalry up front, leading the attack. 50 scythed chariots. The line stretched 6 kilometers. Darius had chosen the ground. He had the numbers. He had the weapons. All he needed was for Alexander to attack. The royal squadron was 300 men. The other squadrons, 250 each, about 2,300 heavy cavalry total. With them, the prodromoi, Macedonian scouts, 1,000 men under Aretas, Paeonian cavalry under Ariston, half the Agrianian javelin throwers under Attalus, Macedonian archers under Briso, Greek mercenary cavalry under Menidas, in the center, the phalanx. Hypaspists, elite shield-bearers under Nicanor, 3,000 men, then 6 battalions of Pesetiroi, the foot companions, 1,500 men each. Koinos commanded the rightmost battalion, Perdiccas, Meleager, Polyperchon, the others. Each man carried a sarissa, an 18-foot pike. The phalanx was a hedgehog of bronze and iron moving in perfect formation. On the left wing, Parmenion commanded. Thessalian cavalry, 1,800 men, the best horsemen in Greece after the companions. Greek allied cavalry, Thracian cavalry, more infantry in support. He planned for the Persians to try envelopment. Darius ordered his left-wing cavalry to move right, to stay opposite Alexander. Bessus commanded that wing. He sent the Scythian and Bactrian cavalry wide, trying to outflank Alexander's right. Menidas and the Greek mercenary cavalry charged them. They were outnumbered. The Scythians drove them back. Alexander sent the Paeonians under Ariston and more mercenary horse. The Scythians wavered. Bessus countered with the Bactrians. The cavalry fight on the right wing became a grinding melee. Arrian writes the Scythians had better armor for themselves and their horses, but the Macedonians held. Squadron after squadron charging. The Bactrian formation finally broke. The phalanx had trained for this. As the chariots approached, the ranks opened. Gaps appeared in the formation. The chariots funneled through the gaps. Light infantry, Agrianians, and archers ran alongside and shot the drivers, grabbed the reins, killed the horses. Some chariots made it through the phalanx and reached the rear, where the second line killed the crews. The chariot attack achieved nothing. Ancient sources disagree on casualties. Diodorus claims the chariots inflicted gruesome casualties before being neutralized. Arrian says they were a failure. Modern analysis suggests minimal damage. The Macedonian phalanx, 18-foot pikes bristling, phalangites, hammering sarissas against shields to create noise and panic, stopped the weapon Darius had counted on. Alexander had been waiting for this. He had pulled cavalry away from his right to draw the Persians out. The movement created a space between the Persian left under Bessus and the center where Darius stood. Alexander saw it. He wheeled his companion cavalry half left, formed a wedge, 2,000 men in tight formation with Alexander at the point, riding Bucephalus, his warhorse. He wore a white plume on his helmet so his men could see him. Bright clothes. He charged straight at the gap. The right moving faster than the left, supporting the cavalry breakthrough. The sarissas hit the Persian immortals, 2-meter Persian spears against 18-foot Macedonian pikes. The reach advantage was brutal. The immortals could not close. The phalanx pushed through. The royal guard, the apple bearers, closed around Darius. Alexander's companions killed them one by one. The horses pulling Darius's chariot were wounded. They reared. The chariot tipped. Darius, about to fall, jumped off. He threw his royal diadem away, mounted a horse, and fled. Most deaths in ancient battles happened during the rout, when formations broke and men turned their backs. The Macedonian cavalry cut them down. Arrian claims 300,000 Persians died with 300,000 more captured. This is impossible. Modern estimates put Persian casualties at 40,000 to 60,000, still catastrophic. Diodorus records 500 Macedonian dead and many wounded. Quintus Curtius says fewer than 300. Arrian says 100 men and 1,000 horses, half of them companions. The disparity suggests Macedonian losses were underreported. Public relations, making Alexander look invincible. But even if we triple Arrian's number, 300 Macedonian dead against 40,000 Persian dead is a kill ratio of 1 to 130. Slaughter. While Alexander charged the Persian center, the left wing under Parmenion faced collapse. Mazias, commanding the Persian right wing, sent his cavalry around the Macedonian left flank. Indian and Persian cavalry broke through a gap in the phalanx, where the battalions had advanced unevenly. They rode through to the Macedonian camp in the rear. The second-line infantry, positioned for exactly this situation, turned and attacked them from behind. Meanwhile, Mazias' main cavalry force attacked the Thessalians head-on. The Thessalians, finest cavalry in Greece, held, but it was desperate. Parmenion sent word to Alexander, help, left wing collapsing. Turned away from the fleeing Persians, rode back to save the left wing. On the way, he collided with the retreating Persian and Indian cavalry who had broken through to the camp. A sharp fight. The Persians were surrounded, Macedonians in front and the second line behind. They were cut down. Alexander reached the left wing. The Thessalians had already scattered Mazaeus' cavalry by the time he arrived. The battle was over. Persian losses were staggering. Curtius, the most conservative ancient historian, records 40,000 Persian dead. Other sources go higher. The Macedonians claimed 100 to 1,000 killed, depending on the source. The truth was probably closer to 1,000, as Diodorus states, with 5,000 wounded. Arrian specifies 60 Macedonian cavalry died in the fighting around Alexander's position during the initial charge. That leaves only 40 for the opening phases and the left-wing crisis. Nonsense. Frontline combat killed more men than that. Persian missiles, spears, the melee on the left wing under Parmenion. The casualty figures were propaganda. Ptolemy, Arrian's source, was one of Alexander's generals. He had every reason to minimize Macedonian losses and maximize Persian ones. Bessus, the satrap of Bactria, who commanded the Persian left wing at Gaugamela, murdered him in July 330 BC, 9 months after the battle. Bessus wanted to stop Alexander by showing the Persians they had a new king willing to fight. It did not work. Alexander found Darius's body on the road. According to Plutarch and Curtius, Alexander covered the body with his own cloak and gave Darius full royal burial at Persepolis. Then he hunted down Bessus. He caught him in Bactria in 329 BC. Bessus was tortured and executed. He entered Susa next, then Persepolis, the Persian capital, in January 330 BC. According to Diodorus and Curius, Alexander was enraged by the extravagance of the palace. He ordered it burned. Whether this was deliberate policy, drunken revenge for Xerxes burning Athens in 480 BC, or an accident during a symposium, the sources disagree. Plutarch says Alexander regretted it immediately. The destruction created resentment among Persians. It destroyed the ceremonial heart of the empire Alexander now ruled. Philip II, Alexander's father, had revolutionized Macedonian warfare. The Sarissa phalanx was nearly unstoppable. 18-foot pikes in the hands of men drilled to move as one unit. The companion cavalry trained to charge in wedge formation, punching through enemy lines like a spear point. Every Macedonian soldier knew his role. They had been campaigning for years. Granicus in 334 BC. Issus in 333 BC, the siege of Tyre, the march through Mesopotamia. They were professionals, and there were only 12,000 of them combined. The rest were light cavalry, archers, infantry with short spears, or no armor. Against the phalanx, they were outmatched. With a sword, nearly split his skull. Clytus the Black, one of Alexander's bodyguards, killed Rhusaces. At Gaugamela, Alexander charged straight at Darius through the Persian royal guard. His men followed because they saw him lead. At Issus, in 333 BC, Darius fled when Alexander's cavalry reached his position. Running twice destroyed his credibility. Kings of kings do not flee while their men die. The Persian army saw Darius abandon them and lost all will to fight. The wedge formation of the companions concentrated force at a single point, breaking the enemy line. Parmenion, holding the left wing despite being outnumbered, bought time for Alexander's breakthrough. Every move was calculated. Darius's plan was simpler. Overwhelm with numbers, use chariots to break the phalanx, outflank with superior cavalry. It should have worked, but Alexander anticipated each move and had a counter ready. The Macedonians took the northern route through Mesopotamia instead of marching straight to Babylon. This gave them easier access to supplies and avoided the extreme heat of the direct route. When Mazaeus tried scorched earth tactics, burning crops and fouling water sources, the northern route gave Alexander alternatives. Darius expected Alexander to take the southern route, the faster path to Babylon. He had positioned his army at Gaugamela to intercept that route. Alexander's choice forced Darius to fight where he was, not where he wanted to be. He was not a coward. Mazaeus commanded the Persian right wing at Gaugamela and fought well. Most likely, he withdrew deliberately to draw Alexander to Gaugamela. Historian Jonah Lendering argues Darius wanted Alexander to reach the plain where the Persians had the advantage. But the speed of Alexander's march gave Darius no time to adjust once the Macedonians crossed the Tigris at an unexpected point. Alexander kept the initiative. Darius reacted. Morale. The eclipse before the battle shook both armies. The Macedonians feared it meant disaster. The Persians saw it as an omen of their king's death. The Egyptian priests with Alexander reframed the omen. The Magians with Darius could not. Soldiers fight harder when they believe the gods favor them. The Macedonians thought they were destined to win. The Persians knew they were doomed. Alexander believed he was invincible, not recklessly. He prepared, planned, listened to generals. But when the moment came, he committed completely. Charged Darius himself. Risked everything on one cavalry breakthrough. If the Persian guard had held, if one spear had found his throat, the Macedonian army would have collapsed. No successor, no way home, surrounded in Persia. Alexander gambled his life on one moment. One. Darius never took that risk. Larger army, better position, every advantage. But he stood in his chariot surrounded by guards, and when Alexander came, he ran. Not once, but twice. Kings who run do not keep thrones. Darius died, murdered 9 months later. Alexander ruled the largest empire in the known world. Darius III was the last king of kings. After Gaugamela, the empire fractured. Satraps submitted to Alexander. By 323 BC, when Alexander died in Babylon at 32, the Persian Empire was gone. Hellenistic kingdoms ruled by his generals: Ptolemy in Egypt, Seleucus in Syria and Mesopotamia, Antigonus in Asia Minor, Greek language, Greek culture, Greek administration. The world Alexander created lasted 3 centuries until Rome absorbed it. Alexander's tactics. Also, historian Peter Green's Alexander of Macedon, published by University of California Press in 1974 and updated in 1991, which provides detailed analysis of Gaugamela's tactical movements based on Arrian's text and terrain reconstruction. Now back to the story. The cavalry fight on flanks lasted longer than usual. The phalanx push through center took time because immortals and Greek hoplites fought hard. The crisis on the left wing under Parmenion dragged on while Alexander broke the center. By the time it ended, the plain was covered in bodies, wounded men, dead horses, broken chariots. The Macedonians spent the rest of the day collecting wounded and stripping Persian dead. Persian camp, 8 miles away, was abandoned. Darius fled so fast he left his chariot, his bow, his diadem. Macedonians found them and brought them to Alexander. 300-man royal squadron and several other squadrons fighting in tight formation around Alexander. If 60 died, the fighting was brutal. Spears, swords, horses colliding, men falling. The Persian apple-bearers and royal guard fought to protect Darius. The companions fought to reach him. Hand-to-hand combat at close range, the kind where men smell each other's breath and blood. 60 companions dead means the Persians killed at least that many before being overwhelmed. It means Alexander was in the center of the killing. He describes Alexander leading the charge and the companions killing the guards around Darius, but does not attribute kills to Alexander specifically. What is certain is that Alexander fought. This was not a general directing from behind the lines. He was in the front, on horseback, with a lance. Once battle started, generals could not give detailed orders. Men fought according to pre-battle plans. A general's presence mattered. If soldiers saw their commander fighting beside them, they fought harder. Alexander understood this, made himself visible, wore bright colors, rode distinctive horse, charged first. His men followed. When Alexander broke through, Darius fled, jumped off chariot, mounted horse, rode east, left his army. Arrian records. Persians near Darius saw him flee and ran too. Collapse spread. Units still fighting saw center dissolve and broke. Left wing under Bessus retreated, covering retreat. Right wing under Mazaeus fought hard before Alexander's arrival forced withdrawal. But center disintegrated, thousands running, Macedonian cavalry chasing, killing as they fled. After the battle, Alexander allowed his men to loot the Persian camp. Darius had brought treasure, food, wine, everything a king of kings needed. The Macedonians took it all. Diodorus mentions the amount of gold and silver was staggering. Alexander distributed it to his troops. This kept morale high and loyalty strong. Darius's family, captured at Issus, were already under his protection. Mazaeus, who commanded the Persian right wing and fought fiercely, was made satrap of Babylon. Other Persian nobles who surrendered were given positions. He did not rule Persia as a conqueror. He presented himself as the rightful successor to Darius, the new king of kings. By treating defeated enemies with respect, he gained cooperation. Most satraps submitted. There is one more detail from Gaugamela that historians find significant. The Babylonian astronomical diary mentions the battle in its entry for the 24th day of the 6th month, which corresponds to October 1st, 331 BC. It says, on the 24th, in the morning, the king of the world Alexander and his army fought a battle against the king, Darius, and the army of the Persians. Heavy defeat of the Persian army. The king, Darius, and his army fled. The text is fragmentary, but the meaning is clear. This is the only contemporary source describing Gaugamela, written within days or weeks of the battle by Babylonian priests, who had no reason to favor one side over the other. They simply recorded what happened. Alexander won, Darius fled, the Persian army was destroyed. The fact that the diary calls Alexander king of the world is significant. The priests wrote this entry before Alexander even reached Babylon. News of his victory at Gaugamela spread fast. The Babylonians knew the empire was finished. They prepared to welcome Alexander as their new ruler. When he arrived on October 22nd, they greeted him as a liberator. Babylon had been part of the Persian Empire for 2 centuries. The Babylonians resented Persian rule. They saw Alexander as the end of their oppression. Whether or not that proved true is another story. But in October 331 BC, the Babylonians celebrated. The Persian Empire was dead. Choosing the battlefield does not guarantee victory. The Persians had all three. They still lost. Why? Because war is decided by the men who fight and the leaders who command them. Alexander's Macedonians were better trained, better led, and more committed than Darius's Persians. They believed they could win. The Persians doubted. When the crisis came, when Alexander broke through the center and rode for Darius, the Macedonians pressed the attack. The Persians broke. The companions followed him knowing the same. The phalanx advanced into a storm of arrows and spears. The left wing held against overwhelming cavalry. They fought when breaking would have been easier. The Persians, outnumbering them 2 to 1 or more, broke instead. Darius fled. The army followed. That is why Alexander won. Living on campaign rations, sleeping in tents or on the ground, they had seen Egypt, Syria, Mesopotamia. They had crossed rivers and mountains and deserts. They had besieged cities and fought battles. Gaugamela was the greatest battle of their lives, the greatest battle of Alexander's campaign, maybe the greatest battle of the ancient world. 47,000 men against 200,000 or more, depending on which source you trust. Outnumbered 3 to 1 or 4 to 1, fighting on ground the enemy chose, facing weapons designed to slaughter infantry. And they won, decisively, completely. The Persian Empire collapsed within a year. Darius died. The satraps submitted or fled. Alexander became the master of Asia. Some would cripple men for life, others would heal but leave scars. Ancient warfare was brutal. Spears through the chest, swords across the face, arrows in the legs and arms and back, trampled by horses, crushed by chariots. The Macedonians who survived Gaugamela carried those memories. Some kept fighting. Alexander pushed east into Bactria, then India. The campaign did not end until his men refused to go further at the Beas River in 326 BC, 5 years after Gaugamela. By then, most of the men who fought on October 1st, 331 BC, were dead or invalided out. Disease, battle wounds, exhaustion. The replacements who came from Macedonia never fought at Gaugamela. They heard the stories. But they did not stand on that plain and watch Alexander charge the Persian king. It lasted 219 years. Alexander ended it in one afternoon. That is why Gaugamela matters. Not because of the tactics, though they were brilliant. Not because of the numbers, though they were lopsided, but because of what it meant. An empire that ruled from the Mediterranean to India fell to a Macedonian king who had 7,000 cavalry and 40,000 infantry. The world changed. Greek became the language of the East. Greek culture spread to Bactria, India, Egypt. Greek cities were founded across Asia. The Hellenistic world Alexander created lasted until Rome absorbed it 3 centuries later. And it started at Gaugamela, October 1st, 331 BC, on a plain in northern Iraq, where 7,000 cavalry shattered an empire. Arrian, writing in the 2nd century AD using Ptolemy's eyewitness account, Diodorus Siculus, 1st century BC, Quintus Curtius Rufus, 1st century AD, Plutarch, 1st and 2nd centuries AD. Different numbers, but core facts match. October 1st, 331 BC, Gaugamela, Alexander outnumbered but victorious. Darius fled. Persian Empire finished. The Babylonian astronomical diary confirms the date and outcome. Archaeological surveys by Sir Aurel Stein in 1938 located the battlefield near Karamlesh, matching ancient descriptions. The eclipse on September 20th is confirmed by modern astronomical calculations. This is documented history. The 4 days of rest before battle. The night before, when Parmenion suggested a night attack and Alexander refused. The morning of October 1st. The Persian formation, 6 kilometers wide, with specific units named by position. The Macedonian formation, 2 lines with Alexander on the right, Parmenion on the left. The oblique advance, the cavalry fight on the flanks, the chariot attack and its failure, the gap in the Persian line. Alexander's charge with the companions, the breakthrough, Darius fleeing, the crisis on the left wing. Parmenion's call for help, Alexander turning back. The final rout, the casualties. Arrian provides numbers, names, unit positions, tactical maneuvers. He is writing 400 years after the event, but his source is Ptolemy, who was there. Ptolemy commanded troops at Gaugamela. He wrote his memoirs late in life as king of Egypt. Arrian used those memoirs. We are reading a fourth-hand account of an eyewitness testimony. That is as close as we can get to the truth. The wedge charge. Most conservative casualty estimate, 40,000 Persians. Fewer than 300 Macedonians. Plutarch adds human details. Alexander oversleeping, his refusal to steal victory. Charging Darius and throwing a spear, missing by inches. Darius fleeing. Alexander covering Darius's body with his cloak 9 months later. Plutarch cares about character. His Alexander is brave, brilliant, tragic. Gaugamela is the high point. The Babylonian astronomical diary adds the final piece. It is not a military history, it is a religious text. Babylonian priests tracking celestial events to interpret omens. But they included political events too, because the gods cared about kings and battles. The entry for September 20th, 331 BC, describes the eclipse in detail. Totality. Western wind during the darkening, eastern wind when the moon reappeared. Deaths and plagues during the eclipse, meaning bad omens. The entry for October 1st describes the battle, heavy defeat of the Persian army. Darius fled. The entry for October 11th describes Alexander sending a message to Babylon. Into your houses I shall not enter, meaning his troops would not loot. The entry for October 14th describes Alexander entering Babylon, king of the world. The priests saw him that way before he arrived. The eclipse predicted it. The battle confirmed it. Darius was finished. Alexander ruled. 9 months after Gaugamela, Bessus declared himself Artaxerxes V, king of kings. He lasted less than a year. Alexander hunted him down in Bactria in 329 BC. Bessus was tried, tortured, and executed for regicide. The Persian Empire, which had existed for 219 years, ceased to exist, replaced by Macedonian rule in the west and fragmented kingdoms in the east. Gaugamela destroyed the army. Darius's death removed the figurehead. The satraps calculated their odds: resist and die, or submit and keep their positions. Most submitted. Mazias submitted and kept Babylon. Other satraps did the same. A few resisted. Alexander crushed them. The rest learned: submit or die. Same lands, same cities, same structure. Different king, Macedonian. Alexander set it for Darius. The oblique advance was bait. Drew Persian cavalry out, created the gap. The wedge charge exploited it. Breakthrough reached Darius. King fled. Army collapsed. Planned from the start. Darius thought he had advantage. Larger army, better position, superior weapons. Walked into a battle Alexander controlled. By the time Darius realized, companions were killing his bodyguard and he was running. In 1938, archaeologist Sir Aurel Stein surveyed the Nineveh plains in northern Iraq. He identified a site near Karamlish, east of Mosul, that matched ancient descriptions of Gaugamela. Low hills, open plain, river Bamodus nearby. The ground had been disturbed, leveled in ancient times. Stein argued this was Darius's prepared battlefield. Subsequent surveys have not found definitive proof. No mass graves, no weapons caches. Ancient battlefields are hard to identify because armies stripped the dead and scavengers took everything valuable. But the location fits. 60 kilometers from Arbela, modern Erbil, near the village whose name meant camel's house in the local language, wide enough for a 6-kilometer line, flat enough for chariots. This is where Alexander fought Darius. This is where the Persian Empire died. The ground remembers. 331 BC, 7,000 cavalry, 47,000 total, against an empire.